Sonny, welcome. Good to have you back.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. It's 1940. The people in Oliver Springs wake up one morning and learn that there's been a double murder. Two sisters, two young business women who ran the hotel. A servant, a black servant, young man who was in their household under their employ, was supposedly blamed for the murder, and they said that he, shortly after killing them, committed suicide himself in an upstairs bedroom. Now, bring to us and our viewers out there what the people in the town thought might have happened.
Well, the folks in town, even at that time, did not believe that Powder Brown, the black boy, was guilty of the murder. Quite a bit of excitement, and people were very distressed to find that this murder had been committed in their town. And but the sheriff of Anderson County, Bob Daugherty, Robert Smith it was, he could not find any other evidence, and kind of in a hurry, so he let the inquest show that the black boy was responsible for the murder. But all through these years, the families of people were connected and knew the intimate things about that situation. They never believed that.
Now, these ladies ran a pretty prominent hotel there in town, didn't they? Very fashionable hotel.
They owned, their father owned the hotel back in the early days, but they were not involved with running the hotel. One of them worked in the bank, and one worked at a brick plant as a bookkeeper.
Right.
So they had a different job to do. They didn't work at the hotel.
Well, we've got a picture of it here that shows the hotel. That's pretty much reminiscent or in character with the kinds of hotels that were built around Springs back in that day. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right. And then also we have the picture where the actual murder took place.
That's true.
And this is a antebellum or Victorian type home.
Beautiful home. One of the nicest ones we ever had.
Yeah. Now, later on, was it how long was it after the murder that this house burned?
It was about 6 years after the murder. I think it was in 47. The murder was 7 years. The murder was in 1940, and the house burned in 1947.
What's on that place now? Is there anything there?
It's a vacant lot. I happen to own that property. They subdivided the land and sold lots, and there were businesses who built, and but the lot is empty.
How far was the hotel away from the house?
Well, perhaps maybe 400 or 500 yards away, or a little bit further perhaps, but not so far that you could not call from the house and be heard at the hotel.
Is that right?
Yes.
Back in those days, bring me up to date a little bit on all of these springs that we take for granted here. We think someone just named it: Newport Springs, Oliver Springs, Red Boiling Springs. There was supposedly a cure, or at least some medication in the water, or some good from that, and people from the north, influential people with money, came here. Is that right?
That's correct. They were known, they had testimonials that were published. People coming with different ailments claimed that they were healed by drinking the sulfur spring water that we had there, and the magnesium springs. Both of these springs were on the same property with the hotel. And of course, we were fortunate to have the salt wells. We had almost any kind of water you're looking for, and it's still available in Oliver Springs.
I was going to ask you about that. What happened? Did they cap this water off, or is it still there, or what? How does this work?
The springs were filled up, and they've been capped off, but we hope that in some near future that the Historical Society can restore those springs. They were in the walling of the springs were not destroyed, we understand, but it was just filled up.
Right.
So hopefully we can get the property back and open them up again.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the finds that were dug up from the home itself. Now, this is over 100 years old, some of these pieces that you've brought into us here.
Well, it's nearly 100 years. The fire that destroyed the hotel was in April of 1905. And so the hotel was a 150-room hotel, very large, covered a lot of property. And one of the fine residents in our town, Billy Powell, and his wife Juanita, bought a lot where the kitchen evidently stood, and they have been digging up dishes and kettles and different things that they found that was destroyed in the fire and buried with the debris.
Well, now, in addition to the pictures that we just saw of both the hotel and the residence, you brought some of these artifacts, is what I would call them,
right,
from the library or from
our museum that we have in archives.
I see.
And I just brought a few pieces of small ones.
Pick up a few of them and let's talk about some of them there. Let's see. Let's talk about those.
Okay.
This and this.
This is a little salad dish that they used in the hotel, and this one here is a bread dish, and something rather unique is a little individual creamer. And of course, you know how you pour cream out, you always
drips down.
So it drips down. It has a saucer with it, and then this is a beautiful creamer that they used right here. That would be for probably a table with several people to be served from.
Yeah.
And they have a lot. They've dug up the plates and so forth, and many things that we haven't gotten yet in our museum, but these are things that they've all, and just part of the things they've given to us.
So we're going to shoot these pieces here so that the people out there can see them in detail here in just a minute. But I really do I appreciate you bringing those, and most of all, I appreciate the interest that you have. Now, how old were you about this time? Not to give your age away, but you were a boy, obviously.
Well, I was 9 years old, and I didn't live in Oliver Springs. I lived a few miles out in the country, but my wife lived there. And she had music by one of the sisters and went to their home, so she was familiar with all the family and with the house where she...
Well, now, speaking about the sisters and all, now, I heard this from talking to you and other people who are involved in the unfolding of this story as it will hopefully go to script and be written for a movie or a television show. What I was told that these two young ladies had tickets that they either had in their possession or in their hands. They were getting ready to come in to see Gone with the Wind at the Tennessee Theater in Knoxville, and I assume by train back at that time. There was a train track running between the two towns. And I know that Gone with the Wind was done in 1939, released, so this would have been probably the premiere of it in 1940 there.
They were very excited. They had already obtained their tickets, and there was just a few days until they would be able to go and see the movie.
Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, Gone with the Wind.
1940. So happened that today's movie you saw with Roy Rogers, and you say, well, you know, what does this got to do with Westerns? All of this has to do with the period and the time, with the interest of things that are happening in and around us that we try to bring you here on this television show. That particular time, that period was a beautiful time. It was the golden years of Hollywood. It was also a very romantic period, and following that with the war years, never has there ever been a more romantic period in the history of our country, and with everything that I've read so far as World War II, with the music, the orchestras, the boy next door who went overseas and didn't come back, the loved one, the newlywed couple who lost their husband immediately. There's never been anything like that in this country, I don't think.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, well, that was a period that we're talking about now, folks, and this hotel and this beautiful old home, we're sitting right over here in Oliver Springs, and of course we have a man who's I would call him the town historian. I don't know whether you have that title or not, but you certainly
sometimes
do. Well, you certainly know the history of Oliver Springs. Now, there's another side of Oliver Springs and another person, another character that ties more in with our show here on Rise of the Silver Screen that I wanted to ask you about. He was a marshal.
That's right.
And his name was Pony Cash. What a name for a marshal. And you brought some pictures of Oliver Springs in those early years when he was shot that we'll be looking at here in just a little bit.
Right.
But right now, give us a little history on him, Pony Cash, and what happened to him.
Well, Pony was the first appointed marshal of the town. The town was incorporated in 1903, and he was the first marshal. I thought it was unique that he would be a marshal, and you are a marshal, so you all would have a lot in common.
Yeah.
He was a tall, slim fella with a square jaw and strong and evidently well liked and respected. He came to Oliver Springs from Rockwood. We don't know a great deal about him before that, other than the fact that he fought in the Civil War. And when he comes on the scene, of course, he probably did some straightening up and made a few arrests and get the town in order to be a place to be incorporated and have a nice city. And, of course, business was booming, and so he had a pretty awesome job. Somewhere along the way, he must have hurt somebody's feelings because it was brought a disaster to him and to his family. He was on his way to the hotel for an entertainment. It was on September the 28th, 1904, 7 months before the hotel burned. And all the town was walking. There was a big dance that night, and everybody was excited. Pony had his son. He had 2 boys, and he had one of his sons by the hand, and he was leading him to the hotel. And on the way, just right at the drugstore, there was a gentleman who has been referred to as Bill. Now, the reason that his name is not told at the time that this history was recorded by our real historian, Snyder Roberts, some of his ancestors were still alive, and I don't think he wanted to name what family Bill was in.
All right.
But Bill stepped out on a area between the Sinknet store and the drugstore and shot Pony Cash 4 times in the heart before he would fall dead. And they said the space of the 4 shots were not farther apart than a man's hand. So as he really shot him fast, and he fell dead.
Was a marksman.
He was a marksman. My wife had a cousin who came to see us. She was 103 years old. She was there when this happened. In fact, Pony Cash fell at her feet.
Now, he was shot in front of the drugstore?
He was shot in front of the drugstore.
You've got a picture of that, and it looks very much like a western town. Let's see if our camera can pick that up right in here, and maybe we can get in on that. Let's see here if we can. If we don't, we'll detail it. Okay. Well, that's an interesting place. That looks like a western city and a western town, doesn't it?
Was.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it, it made this story so interesting to me. The man that shot him, as I'm told, served some time in jail or in prison, but not a long time. And pick up there and tell me what happened.
Well, when Pony was killed, the man was. There was a little excitement about the trial because Oliver Springs is a tri-county town, and the fellow who shot Pony was in Anderson County. Pony was killed in Roane County, even though they were up near to each other. So it had to be legally determined which county that they could try this fella in, because Pony died in one county and was shot from another.
That was a controversy.
That was a controversy there. Yeah. But anyway, he was put in prison and tried in Anderson County's court. And after serving several years, several years I think it was, then he came back to Oliver Springs to visit the scene. And the unique thing was that when he approached the front of the drugstore,
that same building
where Pony had fallen down dead, where he'd shot him, he had a heart attack. They helped him inside the drugstore, and he died at the very scene.
Now, if that isn't
that's
ironic.
A fantastic story.
It really is, and that's what caught my interest when I was told that. I thought, man, that would make a good story to know about. I just love these pictures and the stories that you have. Now, let's bring the people up there as far as what you know, up to date on what's happened as a result of all of this. It's been 61 years.
Yes.
To this date, no one has proved or disproved that this boy did not shoot these ladies and ultimately himself. But they did give him a proper burial here recently, did they not?
Well,
the black boy.
The family, the Richard family's descendants, bought a memorial stone and placed it in the cemetery where Powder was buried. And it was to pay tribute and respect to him and to show that they did not believe that he was guilty of killing their family.
That's the descendants of the
Richards
family.
That's correct.
Now, when was that done?
That was done a couple of months ago on a Sunday
year.
This year.
Isn't that something?
On a Sunday afternoon, and it wasn't announced. If it had been, we would have had a large attendance, but as it was, we had between 40 and 50 people who came.
Just came in, and it wasn't even talked about.
That's correct.
Isn't that something? Well, now, one step further now, since that time, it's still unsolved. The Richards ladies were killed. The boy was blamed, the town, and then therefore the descendants of the family felt like he was not guilty.
Sure.
They gave him a proper burial now with a permanent marker. At that point, what's actually happened? Is anyone still trying to figure out what happened, or what's going on now? Well,
actually, it was just something that developed when they began to talk about one of the relatives inherited a lot of newspaper stories. And when they did,